it really gained its popularity when Cuba gained its independence. It gained popularity among some American soldiers as well, who were volunteers who fought along Cuba during the Spanish-American War. And so it's like a freedom drink, basically, for... Welcome back to another episode of the Social Drinkers podcast, where we talk about the art, the science, and the industry of drinking. And each week we bring a different drink to the podcast. So Mitch, what are you drinking this week?
Oh, well, it's really, really eventful. I have whatever kind of tea that you brought me, because we're recording this at night and have an early wake-up call, so we're not actually drinking this evening. I spoiled your drink. What tea did you even bring? It was whatever you brought upstairs.
Yeah, so it's spearmint tea. It's really good for your digestion and for your skin. But we also drank a lot this past weekend. We went on a trip and to DC, and we went to amazing bars, but we drank a little too much. So we are just like, we cannot drink one more alcoholic beverage, so we need something healthy.
That's true.
Couldn't be me. Could not be me.
What did you bring?
What did I bring, Mitch? I brought myself a little late night snack.
There it is.
Some Cubra.
There
Right here in my little glass.
The late night snack.
Yeah.
Just a neat pour.
A neat pour.
You need an influencer deal, because we did that TikTok video where you're talking about Salvare being your late night snack, and you should just get some billboard made with you holding up a glass of it saying late night snack.
Seriously, that would be great.
Crank up a movie at midnight. Cubra.
There you go. There you go.
Dessert beverages, though, like cocktails, wines, they are slowly becoming my replacement for actual dessert. This past weekend when we were in DC, we had dessert wine for our dessert. It was on the dessert menu. It was so good.
Well, Kate, little fun fact for you. A sign of functioning alcoholics is replacing food with alcohol, so you better be careful.
Uh-oh.
I'm just not much of a sweets eater. I'd rather drink my sweets.
She'd rather get wasted.
No, I agree. I would rather get a good alcohol than eat a dessert. I don't know why. I think it's because we're dairy and gluten-free, not by choice. And so dessert for us kind of sucks. So I'd rather just have dessert wine as well. But
for those who have seen Grown Ups, this is a glass of chocolate wasted.
Chocolate wasted.
And it's awesome.
Let's get chocolatey wasted.
Well, what'd everybody bring?
I'll go first today.
Yeah?
Yeah. All right. So I've probably, if you know me in real life, I have told, I think, every single person about the history of this cocktail. But I just find it really fascinating and interesting. So today we're going to be talking about the history of the Cuba Libre. And if you don't know what the Cuba Libre is, it is the actual name for essentially the rum and coke, the modern day rum and coke.
The go-to.
Yeah. It is a go-to at like literally every bar. It's a go-to for so many people. And I think that the history behind it is so interesting. And I feel like so many people don't know that the cocktail that they're drinking every single day, hopefully not every single day, every weekend when they go out to the bars. And so I'm bringing it to the podcast this week. So the Cuba Libre, which is essentially the modern day rum and coke, the original recipe is basically the same, but you actually add a lime. So it's actually made with white rum, not dark rum, which I feel like typically when you order a rum and coke, it's dark rum. But a Cuba Libre is white rum, Coca-Cola, actual Coca-Cola, not a version of it, and then fresh lime juice, and then you serve it in a highball glass garnished with a lime wedge. So during the 19th century, during the Spanish-American War, in Havana, Cuba, is where the Cuba Libre was born. It means free Cuba because it really gained its popularity when Cuba gained its independence. It gained popularity among some American soldiers as well, who were volunteers who fought along Cuba during the Spanish-American War. And so it's like a freedom drink, basically, for Cubans. And so I thought that was really interesting because it just holds like a lot of significance because it means freedom, and it was used as a celebration drink when Cuba won the war.
Cuban liberation, if you would.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
I've gone through so many cocktail histories and recipes and stories and everything like that. Now, I don't know that we have a patriotic cocktail. Do we? Am I forgetting one?
Beer.
Right. Beer. But yeah, I don't think
Not
that
like,
we.
Not like this. I don't believe. We'll have to actually look that up. But I don't think like this. Like, this is still to this day a very important cocktail to the Cuban community.
Ray, I dare you to go to the bars at college and order a Cuba Libre, and then when they serve you up a Lady Bly and Pepsi, you should throw it back in their face and tell them that you want a Cuban liberation.
You're insulting.
Yeah, you're insulting a whole culture of people. Be hilarious.
Well,
I do think that's a really interesting history because I always thought it was a throwaway cocktail. I always thought it wasn't even a cocktail. It's just a mixed drink. That's what I thought. And so the fact that there's some significance to it is pretty cool.
Nobody does it right, but
right. Yeah. I mean, I've literally never had a Cuba Libre, so
my favorite cocktail, the Captain and Coke.
There you go. See, not even right because it's not white rum. Well,
yep. But
maybe
I will say,
Captain,
if I'm served Captain and Coke without a lime, I am a little upset about it.
Mm.
So
they give
interesting.
You limes in college?
Hell yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Dude, at OU, you would get a Dixie cup with the cheapest rum you could ever buy in the world and whatever was left of the fountain machine.
I will say I'm not sure all the bars do. And by the time I get to some of them, I probably don't care.
Well, that's true.
The bars that I go to start my night, yes, I get a lime.
Love it. That's interesting. That's a cool history. Ray, what did you bring this week?
Well, I brought something that was brought to my attention by our Uncle Don. For those of you who don't know who our Uncle Don is, he's a very tall man.
That's true.
that's the description I'll give you.
Yep.
So if you ever see somebody really tall and skinny, could be him.
Of the millions of people out there, it could be him.
Yeah, just shout Uncle Don. You might find him. But Cutwater, it's a brand. A lot of people know it by their drink ranch water, which isn't their drink. I actually learned that that's a cocktail. Never knew that ranch water was a cocktail. If you type in ranch water on Google, I figured the first thing that would pop up was the Cutwater cans of ranch water.
Yeah.
It's actually recipes for the ranch water cocktail.
Interesting. Okay.
Which I never knew that. So that's an interesting fact alone. But on top of that, Cutwater makes tons of other drinks. And they're all canned cocktails, right? So they have the lime margarita, the tiki rum mai tai, the vodka mule, and the mango margarita. And I'm not sure if they have any more. I'm sure they probably do, but that's just the 4 that pop up on their home screen when you type them in. And supposedly, I've not had them, but I've heard from my Uncle Don that they're very good. Our Uncle Don. My bad.
Our Uncle Don. Did you didn't taste one? I didn't either.
I've had ranch water. I don't like it.
Okay.
I don't really like the ranch water either. Actually, I'd be curious to know what that original cocktail is, because it's actually interesting that it's a cocktail. I thought ranch water, I didn't even know the brand was called Cutwater. I literally thought the brand was ranch water.
Well, that's what I always thought. So we were sitting by the pool and Uncle Don's talking about Cutwater. And I was like, what the heck is Cutwater? And he pulls up a picture of the can and I was like, that's ranch water. And then he started showing me, and like he said that he had the tiki rum Mai Tai, and he said it was killer, like really good.
He said he doesn't like seltzers and canned cocktails much either, and he said they're not as sweet and they don't have that malty taste. So be something worth experimenting with, because I actually, for a seltzer, am okay with ranch water. I feel like it's a little bit lighter on that taste, so the cocktails might be similar in that way.
I pulled up the cocktail, so it's a West Texas recipe where ranch water, like that's where ranch water originated, and ranch water is just Topo Chico and lime juice, but the cocktail you add Blanco tequila. So the like ranch water it was made into a cocktail, but it's very common. It looks like it's very common for you to make it not in a cocktail. So it makes sense why it's light and refreshing, because it's literally just sparkling water and lime juice with some tequila.
Yeah, I'd like to try it. I don't think, we looked it up. We can't buy it near us, I don't think. I'm sure you could buy it and have it shipped to your house, but I think in Ohio, or at least in Cleveland, we couldn't find a location, if I remember right.
Gotcha.
So yeah. Cutwater. I am bringing something near and dear to my heart, and I think near and dear to Kate's heart. So I was doing a little bit of thinking about what I should bring to the podcast, and I realized that I haven't talked about one of my favorite things on the podcast, which is the history of Buffalo Trace Distillery. And this is a fun one. It's wide-ranging, lots of change, lots of conflict, and I don't know, Ray, if you've ever heard anything about it, but Kate, I know you and I did the tour together, and so you probably have a good grasp on some of this stuff. But Ray, do you know, it's probably a good spot to start, the brands that are associated with Buffalo Trace?
I don't.
So Buffalo Trace, in my opinion, has some, in a lot of people's opinions, not just mine. I'm not some like, pioneer thinking that Buffalo Trace is great, but a lot of people would agree that Buffalo Trace has some of the best whiskey brands in the world. The most legendary of which being Pappy Van Winkle. So that sits under the umbrella of Buffalo Trace. That brand is, if you're familiar with the bourbon world, very expensive, it's got a lot of allure surrounding it. It's very desired by every single bourbon collector. I've tasted it. It's very good. I would argue, and I'm going to upset some purists maybe here, I would argue that Blanton's is very close to being on par with Pappy Van Winkle. I've tasted both of them, and I think for the price difference, Blanton's is very close to equal. And like I said, probably going to piss some people off with that, but I just struggle to think that there's a $3,000 difference between those bottles of bourbon. And so that leads me to Blanton's. That's another one. I would recommend that as, and Kate, I don't know if you'd second this or disagree. If you're looking for an expensive bourbon that doesn't break the bank, Blanton's is, in my opinion, hands down the best one.
Define doesn't break the bank. It's still pretty expensive.
It's expensive. I said an expensive bottle, but doesn't break the bank. So to put that in perspective, there are bottles of bourbon out there that are thousands of dollars, Pappy Van Winkle being one of them. Blanton's is like $150, $200.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for something,
I would agree,
very nice that you're going to drink once in a while, special occasions, you have a kid and you want to have a celebratory drink, or I don't know, something happens, whatever you celebrate, I don't know, you want to have a nice little pour of bourbon, Blanton's is a great option for that. Yeah, people celebrate all different kinds of stuff. I mean, people celebrate graduating from preschool. I don't know.
Grab your preschooler and give them some Blantons.
Have some Blantons.
Yeah, give him a shot of Blantons after they graduate preschool. Set them on the right track.
Set them on the right track. Make a man.
Make a man. But anyway, this distillery has a long history to it. It's actually the oldest continuously operating distillery in America, which I thought was very interesting, dating back to 1773. I do not know what the oldest distillery that's not continuously operating is. I didn't look into it that far, so I apologize.
Probably the one on George Washington's.
But I don't know if it's still around. I don't think that's still around. But
oh, you mean still around, but not operating?
Right. Yeah. So because of Prohibition, that's when the operating took a pause, which is why I'm saying it like
so
that.
Like the building and everything would still be there, but it's not
operating.
Functioning.
This happened during Prohibition. You had many distilleries that were founded and producing whiskey, and then Prohibition stops everything. Well, it didn't stop Buffalo Trace. We're going to get there, but first I want to touch on in 1773, it wasn't founded as Buffalo Trace. It was founded as Old Fire Copper, OFC Distillery, in Franklin County, awesome. Kentucky, where it is now. And so it wasn't actually renamed Buffalo Trace until, let me look at my notes, 1999.
Oh my gosh, that's recent.
Yeah. And so that's where between 1773 and 1999, there's a ton of change and conflict and everything. So in 1870, there was an expansion of the distillery. That whole facility that we went to was built. George T. Stagg and Colonel E.H. Taylor were involved in this. And so E.H. Taylor is actually one of their nicer bourbon brands that lies under that. And it was named the George T. Stagg Distillery. And so that's what it operated under until 1999 when it became Buffalo Trace. But the really interesting piece of their story is during Prohibition, they were authorized under federal permits to continue commercially producing spirits for medicinal purposes. You've heard of this. If you know anything about Prohibition, you've heard of medicinal liquor. Buffalo Trace was a massive producer of that, and it allowed them to be a continuously operating distillery in the U.S.
Interesting. So it wasn't Buffalo Trace. It was OF
George TC? At that time it would have been George T. Stagg Distillery. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
I'm looking up a picture on my phone because when we were in DC, we went to the American History Museum and I took a picture of a medicinal bottle of bourbon. So I'm just very curious to see if it says, okay, so this is bottled in bond by Dorley Distillery and Warehouse. That would have been funny if it was Buffalo Trace.
It definitely would have been. Yeah, that they are not the only ones who were medicinal producers during that time, but they are the oldest continuously operating distillery, which I thought was interesting. And a couple other things to note about Buffalo Trace, some of the things that I would recommend and that I think others would recommend their whiskey for is they are the first to create a state-of-the-art temperature-controlled aging barn. And so that's part of what they give credit to their whiskey tasting so good and aging so well. They are the first to really produce that state-of-the-art facility. And I can speak to it having been there. It is a state-of-the-art facility. And there is just a lot of I used the word earlier, but it's the right word, I think. There's a lot of allure surrounding their facility and their whiskeys and the stories they tell. They do a really, really great job of touring you through the facility and telling stories about the different people who have been involved in the distillery over time and the awards they've won. And they do an amazing tasting. And I just highly recommend Buffalo Trace as a whole. There are a lot of different bourbons at different price points that you can try. My favorite one, if you're looking for a mid-range, if you can find it, is Eagle Rare. That one is, I believe, maybe $30. It's nothing crazy, but that's a phenomenal bourbon that I would recommend from them. So I thought it was interesting. I haven't had the chance to go through that on the podcast yet, but yeah, Buffalo Trace, check them out.
The state-of-the-art facilities are really interesting. When we were doing the tour, they rotate their whiskey barrels because the way that the sunlight comes in to the building at different times of the year, and the way that, and when sunlight hits the barrel, it aids in the fermentation process differently than when sunlight isn't hitting the barrel. And so they have a very succinct process of like rotating these barrels over time, which I thought was really interesting, and actually not something we've done a few distillery tours, and I've never seen that anywhere else other than at Buffalo Trace.
Yeah, that's interesting. And as you were talking, I was thinking back to the tour, and it's where I heard one of my favorite stories I've ever heard. And I have no idea if this is true or not, but I'm going to recount the story that was told to us during our tour. And it's the story of the phrase "on the rocks." So we're going through this tour, and Buffalo Trace is situated with a river behind it. And many of the older distilleries were situated on a river because the water powered the distillery. And so we're going, and we get up to the tasting, and he makes a joke about everything's going to be neat. You don't get the option for "on the rocks" during this tasting. And he says "on the rocks." And he goes, does anyone know where the phrase "on the rocks" originated from? Nobody knows. He says, the phrase actually originated here at Buffalo Trace. Somebody wanted ice in their whiskey. And so rather than putting ice in the whiskey because they didn't have any, the bartender walked out to the river with a mallet and smashed a rock that was sitting at the bottom of the river because the river was so cold, put it into the whiskey, and the whiskey was on the rocks. I don't know how true that is, but Ray, it looks like you may have heard of this before.
No, I haven't. But okay. I want to meet the guy that walked down to the river and was like,
ah! Dude, that's what I'm saying, right? I kind of called
the glass.
Yeah.
Completely not sanitary. Who gives a rat's ass, dude? Throw some liquor on it. Let's drink.
I think it's so funny, and I call BS on it because if I'm a bartender, I'm not walking down in the river with a hammer, getting my feet all wet, busting up a rock. It's probably nighttime. There are a lot of holes in this story, but I've yet to hear the other true story. So that's the truth.
Hey, and you know what? That's some good natural flavor that he's adding.
Exactly. Right? Natural flavor.
Minerals.
And hey, you know what? Stuff. It's a story that could be BS that I didn't make up. So I'm taking it as truth.
Well, Mitch, this has all inspired me to wonder what the oldest distillery in the world is. Do you know? And do you have a guess?
I would guess somewhere in Ireland.
Yeah, I mean, no. I don't know what it is, but somewhere maybe in France.
Okay, it's in the Netherlands.
Okay.
It is Lucas Bols Distillery. If I butchered that, I apologize. I'm not from the Netherlands. But became operational, and I shouldn't say the oldest. The oldest still operating distillery in the world.
Okay, yeah.
1517 or 1575. Sorry.
Wow.
Right, by the Bols family. It is the oldest surviving distillery in the world. They created over 300 liquor recipes. Probably messed that up.
That's all right.
Liquor and liqueur, they're different.
Yeah, they
are. It's liquor. Now that I'm looking at the word that I was reading, it's liquor.
Well, they're European, so it's very possible it's spelled differently.
Yeah, but by the 18th, so by the turn of the 18th century, so 1700, they had 300 liquor recipes and had started worldwide distribution.
300 recipes. Wow.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy.
That's insane. The 1500. That would be cool to go to.
Really cool. I want to tour that place.
Yeah, right? Me too.
And I'm looking at a picture of it, and it looks pretty modern. Like, it's very interesting because I would anticipate it to look really old. This is a picture of the inside, so I don't know what the outside looks like. I'm sure I could find out with a quick Google search, but
well, I think a lot of these places maintain their look on the outside for the history of it, for staying true to their roots, but the insides kind of have to update with the times because of the technology they're using, because of the aging requirements and all that stuff. And then also, I don't actually know, but I would imagine for federal guidelines and stuff, I'm sure they have inspectors that come out and you have to be up to codes and standards for distilling and everything like that.
It appears to be in a little storefront.
Interesting.
Like on a road.
Huh.
Very interesting. It looks very cool. They have a little bar inside, so we might have to make a trip to the Netherlands.
Well, Social Drinkers takes the Netherlands. That would be pretty fun.
It would be
I'm
fun.
down.
Yeah, I'm down as well.
Okay, so did you guys see that Cholula, it came out with a hot sauce that is made with 100% tequila and has an ABV of 1.8%. It's a hot sauce with alcohol in it.
Where do I acquire said hot sauce?
I have a question though. Why would you make 1.8% ABV hot sauce? It's not gonna do anything. It's just gonna taste like tequila.
I don't know why they made it, but I looked on their website to try and figure out kind of why, like, what do you use this for? And on their website, it said, like, put it in your Paloma or put it in your margarita to be like a spicy. So it's almost like a bitters kind of, but hot sauce, but like you can actually like put it on your food too. So I just found it interesting. I've never heard of a like condiment containing alcohol.
That is interesting. Yeah, I guess it'd be used for sort of a bitter, because I know a lot of people put hot sauce in their Bloody Marys. So people are probably going to use it for that. Do you have to be, I assume you have to be 21 to buy it?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
I think there's some line. I think it's 0. It's really low. The 0.006 or something like that, that you have to be 21 or something. So you have to be 21 to buy the hot sauce, which is funny, but
it's rolled out nationwide. So you should be able to like go to your store and find it. I just don't know if they would be selling it on the shelves with hot sauce or if they would be selling it elsewhere.
I want this. I
what
just
was
want to
rolling through my mind was like, you said made with 100% tequila, and then you said 1.8, and I was like, if I'm gonna take tequila shots, it's not because I want to.
Yeah, that's true. You never take tequila shots because you're wanting to take tequila shots. You're always forced into them.
Let alone that's like true. A spice. I imagine this tasting like a spicy tequila.
Yeah, probably.
But we need to find out. So
have to find out. Taste tests on the podcast. We do a lot of those.
Yeah,
that's
we do.
The best way to do it.
We do a lot of those.
Speaking of, I'm enjoying this Silveray. It's very good.
Midnight snack.
Yeah. You know? And I just want everybody to know that if you have the opportunity to get Silveray chocolate rum, it won't let you down.
That's true. It is very good. And I don't even like sweet chocolatey stuff that much, especially drinks, but it is very good.
Well, it's still a rum though. Like, you know, you can get like sweet chocolatey drinks that are like taste like you're drinking like chocolate syrup.
Yeah, that's true.
This is like you drink it and it's still a rum.
You need the Silveray chocolate rum with a Cardi B whip shot on top of it.
These whip shots that you keep talking about, I need some of these whip shots.
You can't. They're not dairy free.
Make sure I'm not around for that.
I'm taking them.
I'm taking them.
Ray, you're riding to Folly Beach with us. I'm taking them before the ride.
All right.
Do you guys know what the 3-tier system for distribution is in the US?
Yes.
Maybe from the newsletter.
I've probably heard of it.
I remember it from the newsletter. Production, wholesaling, retailing.
Close. So you're really close. Production is manufacture. So same thing. I learned of this doing some research on alcohol distribution and retailing, and I had never heard of it before, but I wrote about it in the newsletter. I thought it'd be fun to talk about here. So I won't go too far in depth, but basically before Prohibition and during Prohibition, anybody and everybody was making alcohol, selling alcohol, putting it in their store. There wasn't really a lot of guideline or law surrounding that. And so one of the stipulations after Prohibition, the 21st Amendment ended Prohibition in 1933. And the 3-tier system for distribution was established. And what it did was it basically put laws in place that said, these types of businesses can manufacture alcohol. These types of businesses can wholesale and distribute alcohol. These types of businesses can retail alcohol. And so that's the 3-tier system. There's not much more to it, but I thought it was really interesting because I'd literally never heard of that before. There's manufacturers, there's wholesalers, there's retailers. You can apply for licenses and permits to live in different buckets at the same time, but you have to have licenses and permits to live within those certain buckets.
Interesting. And I wonder what this law is, because I don't know for sure. But when we were in Savannah, Georgia, we went to this brewery called Service Brewing. It's really cool. If you ever get the opportunity to check them out, highly recommend it. They're a veteran-owned and operated brewery in Savannah. And when we went to the brewery, you had to do a tour. Legally, they had to give you a tour of the brewery if you were going to be drinking there.
Yeah, this is something, I don't know every state's laws on this, but basically the state can mandate different things exception wise to this 3-tier system to basically accommodate visitors. So in Georgia, for example, they don't want you to go to the brewery and not be able to drink, because what's the point of having you there? But you can't go into that building and drink without doing the tour. So it's kind of their exception to the rule. And every state has different exceptions to the rule with their weird alcohol laws. We don't have to deal with that in Ohio at all. In Tennessee, we really didn't have to deal with that other than a couple strange retail laws, but nothing crazy. But other states, that's not the case. Pennsylvania, Georgia, many other states, there's a lot of different laws that the state will sometimes make exception to for consumer experience.
Nope.
Yeah, pretty cool. I'd never heard of it before.
No, I haven't either, and that's actually really interesting.
But it made sense. They laid that, it was, I'm sure, much negotiation to end prohibition. And so it was one of the laws that had to be put in place to put some law and order in the alcohol industry.
Well, I can't imagine what a mess it was when I recently learned that during Prohibition, because of religious reasons, you could produce up to 200 gallons of wine in your home a year.
Per person.
Per person.
Yeah.
Wait, hold on. Per person. So if I had a 5-person home, I could produce 1,000 gallons of wine.
I don't know what the age requirements were, or if it maybe it wasn't per person, maybe it was per home, but still 200 gallons of wine.
Regardless, yeah,
it's a lot. Absurd. It's a lot of wine.
Yeah, absurd. So I imagine when Prohibition ended, you had to put all of these different laws and stuff in place to prohibit that from going on, and I'm sure it was a disaster. I can't even imagine, but it's really interesting to learn about all of the like workarounds, the medicinal whiskey, kind of like now we have medicinal marijuana, and like for religious reasons, you could only produce wine. Like you couldn't produce beer, but it makes sense because in a lot of religions, wine is like a sacred drink. So it's interesting.
Yep.
Do you guys know how many ounces are in your average glass of wine? I'm assuming it's like 12.
No.
Am I out of my mind?
Yes. Yeah.
That's a Mitch pour.
That's a me pour. I think the standard glass of wine is 6 ounces.
6 ounces? Okay.
Yeah.
6 ounces. Just so you know, 200 gallons of wine, if you pour 6 ounces, is 4,266 glasses of wine.
It's a lot of glasses of wine.
If you divide that by 365, that's 11 glasses a day.
You start in the morning and you end before bed. Just drink it all day like coffee.
That's absurd.
Oh my God.
That is absurd. That's ridiculous. But yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I like it. All right. Is that it? Anybody have anything else?
That was all I brought.
I don't think so. I'm
alrighty.
Firmly buzzing.
The Salvaray's got him.
The Salvaray got him in the pre-gaming before the pod.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, I'll take us out of here. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to continue to listen to the podcast, make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode drop. If you enjoyed the podcast and you want this similar content straight to your straight to your email, we have a newsletter called Shots, and it is essentially the written version of the podcast. It's super fun. It's hilarious, if I don't say so myself. So you can check that out in the description. There'll be a link where you can sign up for that. And then you can follow us on all the social platforms. We're all linked below. We're on literally everything at We Are Social Drinkers. And I think that's it.
I think so. Well, cheers with my non-alcoholic tea.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, everybody.